There's something rather peculiar about the experience of loneliness that nobody really talks about honestly. We've been taught to interpret it as a problem, a sign that something's wrong, that we're failing socially, that we've made wrong turns somewhere and ended up isolated when we should be connected. And so when loneliness arrives, that deep, aching sense of being fundamentally alone, even in a room full of people, we panic. We think we're lost, off track, doing life wrong. We scramble to fix it, to find people, to fill the emptiness with connection, activity, anything to make the feeling go away. Yeah. But what if loneliness isn't a sign you're lost? What if it's actually a sign you're being found? Okay. Have you felt this? That particular loneliness that comes not from being physically alone, but from being awake in ways that make you incompatible with most of the world? Like the loneliness of seeing what others don't see, of valuing what others don't value, of having outgrown the places and people that once felt like home. Can't. This isn't the loneliness of social isolation. That's different and often easier to solve. This is existential loneliness, the loneliness of being conscious in an unconscious world. The loneliness of transformation, the loneliness that comes when you're no longer who you were, but not yet fully who you're becoming. And here's what nobody tells you. This loneliness isn't a deviation from your path. It is the path. It's not evidence that you've made wrong choices. It's evidence that you've made brave ones. It's not a sign you're lost. It's a sign you've stopped following the herd and started following something deeper. But we've been conditioned to fear loneliness so deeply that I'll do almost anything to avoid it. Even sacrifice our own growth, our own truth, our own becoming. Ank. Let me tell you about someone I once knew. We'll call her Rachel. She was in her early 30s when she started experiencing a loneliness so profound it scared her, not because she was alone. She had friends, family, a partner, but because she felt alone, fundamentally, existentially alone, in a way she'd never felt before. It started when she began questioning things. The career path everyone said was impressive, but left her feeling empty. The relationship that looked perfect from the outside, but felt hollow from the inside. The friendships built on shared complaints rather than shared growth. The entire life she constructed according to what she was supposed to want. And as she questioned, as she started making changes, as she began living more authentically, the loneliness intensified. Her friends didn't understand why she'd leave a good job. Her family worried she was having a breakdown. Her partner felt threatened by her growth. And Rachel found herself in this strange space where she was surrounded by people, but felt utterly alone. Okay? She interpreted this loneliness as a sign she'd made wrong choices. If I were on the right path, she thought, I'd feel connected, not isolated. I must be doing something wrong. So she tried to fix it, tried to reconnect with old friends by pretending she hadn't changed, tried to stay in her relationship by making herself smaller, tried to explain her choices in ways that would make others comfortable. But none of it worked. The loneliness remained, and worse. Now, she felt like she was betraying herself to avoid the loneliness, which created a different kind of pain. The pain of self-abandonment. But here's what they don't understand. That most people fall into once they encounter transformational once you've grown beyond certain patterns. They think it's a problem. Once you've tasted authenticity, a sign something's going back, evidence they've taken a wrong turn. You can pretend to go back, but you'll just be performing back to the version of yourself that no longer exists, back to relationships that no longer fit, existential version of themselves. They've outgrown. Think about a caterpillar in a cocoon. It's completely alone in there, isolated, dissolved into something that's neither caterpillar nor butterfly. And if that caterpillar could think, it might interpret that loneliness as a sign something's terribly wrong. I should be with other caterpillars, doing caterpillar things. This isolation must mean I'm lost. But of course, the loneliness isn't evidence of being lost. It's evidence of transformation. The caterpillar is alone because it's becoming something entirely different. And that process, that sacred, necessary process, requires a period of solitary dissolution and reformation. Yeah. This is what's happening to you when you experience that deep existential loneliness. You're in the cocoon. You're between selves. You're no longer who you were, but not yet fully who you're becoming. And that in-between space is inherently lonely because you're in a place most people never enter. Yeah. Yeah. Now here's what our culture desperately doesn't want you to know. Loneliness is not always a problem. Sometimes, often, it's a compass. It's your soul's way of saying, you've outgrown this. It's time to move on. Yes, it hurts, but staying would hurt more. Okay. We live in a culture that pathologizes loneliness. There are entire industries built around making sure you never have to be alone. Dating apps, social media, networking events, communities, for every possible interest. The underlying message is clear. Loneliness is bad. Connection is good. And if you're lonely, something needs to be fixed. But this completely misses the distinction between toxic loneliness and sacred loneliness. Toxic loneliness is the loneliness of disconnection from self when you re-surrounded by people, but performing rather than being authentic. When you're in relationships, but hiding who you really are. Sacred loneliness is the loneliness of transformation. When you're alone because you've outgrown your previous life, but haven't yet grown into your next one. Okay. Let me tell you about a man named Joel. He went through a divorce in his 40s. Not a bitter one, just a recognition that they'd grown in different directions. And after the divorce, he experienced loneliness like he'd never known. His married friends didn't quite know what to do with him. His social life had been built around couple activities. His sense of identity had been wrapped up in being a husband. For months, Joel tried to escape the loneliness, online dating, though he wasn't ready, forcing himself to go to social events where he felt like an alien, saying yes to every invitation even when he didn't want to go, just to avoid being alone. Because he'd interpreted the loneliness as evidence he'd made a mistake, that he should have stayed married, that he was now lost and needed to find his way back to connection as quickly as possible. Yeah. But then something shifted. A friend, someone who'd been through their own transformation, told him, what if the loneliness isn't the problem? What if it's the point? What if you're supposed to be alone right now to figure out who you are outside of being someone's husband, outside of the social structures you've been living in? This reframed everything for Joel. He stopped fighting the loneliness and started exploring it, stopped trying to fill the emptiness, and started sitting with it. And in that space, that uncomfortable, quiet, solitary space, he discovered parts of himself he'd never known existed, interests he'd suppressed, desires he'd ignored, a way of being that was authentically his, rather than adapted to please others or fit into relationship dynamics. Okay? Here's the hidden truth. Most people are terrified of loneliness, not because loneliness itself is so painful, but because loneliness forces you to be with yourself. And many people have spent their entire lives avoiding that, avoiding the raw, unmediated experience of their own being. They've filled every moment with distraction, connection, activity, noise, and the thought of being alone with themselves, with no buffer, no distraction, no one to perform for. It's terrifying. But this is precisely why loneliness is so valuable. Why it's all the pretense, forget all the pretense. It strips yourself directly. It asks the questions you've been avoiding. Okay. Who are you when you're not being who others need you to be? What do you actually want versus what you think you should want? What matters to you when you're not performing for an audience? Sacred loneliness is the crucible where authentic selfhood is forged. It's uncomfortable, yes, sometimes painful, but it's not a sign you're lost. It's a sign you're finding yourself, perhaps for the first time. Okay. Now let's be honest about what happens when you misinterpret loneliness as a sign you're lost, because the consequences of this misinterpretation are significant. Okay. The first danger is premature reconnection. You feel lonely, interpret it as wrong, and desperately seek connection to make the feeling go away. So you jump into relationships you're not ready for. You reconnect with people you've outgrown. You say yes to social situations that drain rather than nourish you. You fill your life with people just to avoid the feeling of emptiness. Rachel did this. She got so uncomfortable with her loneliness that she started dating someone completely wrong for her just to not be alone. She rejoined social groups she'd left for good reasons. She filled her calendar so completely there was no space for the solitude. Her transformation actually required, and all of this just delayed her growth and created new problems. Because here's the thing, connections formed from desperation to escape loneliness are rarely healthy connections. They're built on need rather than genuine resonance. They're about filling a void rather than sharing fullness. And they often end up creating a worse kind of loneliness. The loneliness of being with people who don't actually see you. Yeah. The second danger is self-abandonment. When you think loneliness means you're lost, you assume you need to change something about yourself to find your way back. So you start conforming again, making yourself smaller, hiding the parts of you that seem to create distance from others, pretending you haven't grown or changed or evolved. Again, Joel almost fell into this trap. He started thinking maybe he should try to get back with his ex-wife, or at least become the person he was when they were together, because that version of him wasn't lonely. But of course, that version of him also wasn't authentic. He was trading his truth for the comfort of connection, which is never a sustainable trade. Okay. The third danger is missing the message. Loneliness, when it arises during periods of growth and transformation, is trying to tell you something. It's saying you need space, you need solitude, you need time to integrate who you're becoming. But when you interpret it as a problem to fix, you never hear the actual message. You're too busy trying to make it go away to understand what it's trying to show you. Nick. I've watched people go through the same transformational cycle multiple times. Growth, loneliness, panic, retreat to old patterns, temporary relief, stagnation, growth, loneliness, panic, round and round, because they never stop long enough to recognize that the loneliness is part of the cycle, not a deviation from it. It's the chrysalis stage, and you can't become a butterfly by leaving the chrysalis prematurely. Okay. The fourth danger is chronic comparison. When you're lonely and you think it means something's wrong, you look around at other people who seem connected, social, never alone, and you think they have something you're missing. You think you're failing at life because you're experiencing something they're not experiencing. Okay? Yeah. But here's what you don't see. Most of those connected people are performing connection while feeling internally alone. Most of them are in relationships that lack real intimacy, surrounded by people who don't actually know them. They've chosen quantity of connection over quality of authenticity. And while they might not experience the acute loneliness of solitude, they're experiencing the chronic loneliness of being unknown. Yeah? But now we must turn this entire situation inside out and see the profound paradox at its heart. Okay? The paradox is this: the loneliness that comes from authentic growth is not something to be cured. It's something to be honored. It's not evidence you're lost. It's evidence you've stopped being lost. You were lost when you were following paths that weren't yours, when you were being who others needed you to be, when you were performing life rather than living it. The loneliness is what happens when you stop being lost and start finding your true path. Let me tell you what happened to Rachel once. She stopped fighting her loneliness. She was sitting alone in her apartment one evening, something she'd been avoiding for months, and she just let herself feel it. The loneliness, the emptiness, the lack of connection. She stopped trying to fix it or fill it or escape it. She just felt it fully, and in that feeling, something extraordinary happened. The loneliness didn't intensify. It transformed. What she'd been calling loneliness, she realized, was actually aloneness, and aloneness, when you stop fighting it, is not the same as loneliness at all. Aloneness is a state of being with yourself. Loneliness is a state of wishing you weren't. Kenny. She started to enjoy her own company. Started discovering that the silence she'd been afraid of was actually peaceful. Started realizing that the space she'd been trying to fill was actually sacred. It was the space where she could hear her own voice, feel her own feelings, know her own truth, without the constant static of other people's needs and expectations. And then, paradoxically, real connection started finding her. Not because she was desperately seeking it, but because she was finally genuinely herself, and genuine people started resonating with that genuineness. Not many people, quality over quantity, but the right people, people who didn't need her to be anything other than what she was, people who could meet her at depth rather than at surface level. Here's the wisdom. You have to be willing to be alone to discover who you really are. And you have to know who you really are to form genuine connections. So loneliness isn't the deviation from the path to connection. It's actually a necessary stage on that path. Yeah, Joel discovered this too. After months of sitting with his loneliness rather than running from it, he emerged as someone completely different, not just comfortable being alone, but actually valuing it. He discovered hobbies he loved, interests he'd never explored, a relationship with himself that was rich and fulfilling. He was no longer lonely. He was alone, and there's a world of difference. And from that place of comfortable aloneness, he eventually found a new relationship. But this one was completely different from his marriage. It was based on two whole people choosing each other, not two half people needing each other. It was built on genuine compatibility rather than fear of loneliness. It was a celebration of connection rather than an escape from solitude. Yeah. The wisdom here is profound. Loneliness is often a sign that you're transitioning from false connection to authentic connection. The old connections, built on who you were pretending to be, no longer fit. The new connections, built on who you actually are, haven't formed yet. And the gap between those two states feels like loneliness. But it's not wrong. It's the necessary space of transformation. So, how do you navigate this? How do you honor loneliness as a sign you're finding yourself rather than losing yourself? Okay. First, learn to distinguish between loneliness and aloneness. Loneliness is accompanied by the story that something's wrong, that you shouldn't be alone, that this needs to be fixed. Aloneness is simply the experience of being with yourself without that story. Same circumstance, completely different relationship to it. Okay. When loneliness arises, pause before reacting. Instead of immediately trying to fix it or fill it, ask, what is this loneliness trying to tell me? What am I avoiding by being afraid of it? Often, loneliness is pointing towards something you need to face, some way you need to grow, some truth you need to acknowledge. And Rachel learned to do this. When loneliness hit, instead of reaching for her phone or making plans or filling the space, she'd sit with it. Okay, loneliness, what do you want me to see? And often the answer was illuminating. Sometimes it was pointing to a relationship she needed to release. Sometimes to a part of herself she'd been neglecting. Sometimes just to the simple fact that she needed rest, space, integration time. And second, create a practice of being alone, intentionally, not reactively. Don't wait until you're forced into solitude. Choose it. Schedule time to be with yourself without distraction. No phone, no books, no music, just you and your own being. This is terrifying at first for most people, but it's essential. Okay. This is different from loneliness. This is cultivation of aloneness. You're learning to be comfortable with yourself, to enjoy your own company, to find richness in solitude. And the more you do this, the less you experience loneliness, because you're no longer afraid of being alone. You've discovered that being alone doesn't mean being lonely. Camp. Joel made this a practice. Every Sunday morning, he'd spend 2 hours alone, walking, sitting, being. No agenda, no productivity, no distraction, just being with himself. And this practice transformed his relationship with solitude completely. He stopped fearing it and started valuing it. Okay? Third, be discerning about connection. Not all connection alleviates loneliness. Sometimes connection, especially superficial connection, actually intensifies the feeling of being alone, because you're with people, but still not truly seen or known. Okay. Ask yourself, am I seeking connection to avoid loneliness? Or am I seeking connection from a place of already being comfortable alone? The first creates needy, unsatisfying relationships. The second creates genuine, nourishing ones. Wait for the right connections. Don't fill your life with people just to not be alone. Better to be alone and authentic than surrounded and performing. The right people, the ones who can meet you where you actually are. They'll show up when you're ready, which often means when you've stopped desperately seeking them. Okay. And finally, trust the timing of your transformation. The cocoon stage doesn't last forever. The loneliness of transition is temporary, but it's necessary, and trying to rush through it or avoid it only prolongs it. Right? Yeah. Rachel is on the other side now. She has a small circle of genuine friends. People who know her, really know her, and love her for who she actually is. She has work that fulfills her. She has a life that's hers, rather than one performed for others. And sometimes she's alone, but she's rarely lonely anymore, because she's found herself, and once you found yourself, you're never truly alone. Okay. So let's return to where we started. Why should you never mistake loneliness for a sign you're lost? Okay. Because loneliness, the deep existential loneliness that comes during periods of growth and transformation, is not evidence that you've taken wrong turns. It's evidence that you've stopped following the well-worn path and started forging your own. It's not a sign you're moving away from connection. It's a sign you're moving toward authentic connection by first connecting with yourself. Yeah? The culture will tell you that loneliness is a problem to be solved immediately. That if you're lonely, you need to get out there, meet people, find a partner, build a social life. And sure, chronic isolation isn't healthy, but neither is filling your life with false connection, just to avoid the discomfort of being alone with yourself. There's a difference between loneliness that comes from genuine isolation, from having no one, and loneliness that comes from transformation, from being between worlds, between selves, between the false and the true. The first needs addressing through reaching out. The second needs honoring through going within. If you're experiencing that deep loneliness right now, If you feel fundamentally alone, even though you're surrounded by people, if you feel like you no longer fit in the places and relationships that once felt like home, if you feel isolated by your own growth, please don't panic. So, please don't interpret it as evidence you're lost or broken or doing life wrong. Yeah? You're not lost. You're being found. You're not broken. You're breaking free. You're not doing life wrong. You're finally doing it right, which means doing it authentically, which means outgrowing the comfortable lies and stepping into uncomfortable truth. Okay. Rachel looks back now on that period of intense loneliness as the most important time of her life. I thought I was falling apart, she says, but I was actually coming together as myself, not as who I thought I should be. Yeah. Joel says the same. The loneliness was my soul, making space for me to finally show up. All those years of marriage, I was there, but not really there. The loneliness after the divorce forced me to actually be present with myself. It was a gift, even though it didn't feel like one at the time. Yeah. The loneliness you're experiencing might be the most important thing happening to you right now. It might be the space your soul is creating for transformation. It might be the necessary solitude of the cocoon before you emerge with wings. Kenny, don't rush to fill it. Don't scramble to escape it. Don't interpret it as evidence you're lost. Sit with it. Listen to it. Let it show you what it wants you to see. Let it teach you what it wants you to learn. Okay? Because on the other side of this loneliness, this sacred, transformational, necessary loneliness is not the connection you left behind. That's gone, and it needed to go. On the other side is something far more valuable, genuine connection, starting with connection to yourself. Once you've found yourself in the solitude, once you've learned to be alone without being lonely, once you've discovered that you are enough company for yourself, then the right connections will form naturally. Not because you need them to complete you, but because you're whole and you're sharing that wholeness with others who are also whole. Yeah. That's real connection. That's the connection worth waiting for, worth being lonely for, worth honoring this sacred space of aloneness for. And so if you're lonely right now, truly, deeply, existentially lonely, know this, you're not lost. You're in transition. You're in the cocoon. You're in the sacred space between who you were and who you're becoming. And this space, while uncomfortable, is exactly where you need to be. And trust it, honor it. Don't run from it. The loneliness isn't the problem, it's the path. And you're not lost. You're exactly where you need to be. Learning exactly what you need to learn, becoming exactly who you're meant to become. Okay. The transformation continues. The loneliness will pass, and you will emerge not lost but found, not incomplete but whole, not needing connection to feel okay, but ready for connection from a place of already being okay. That's the gift of loneliness. That's the teaching. That's the truth that our culture doesn't want you to know.